He is a cunning, intelligent, cold-blooded kidnapper, rapist, and killer.
Bobby Joe Long had a history of violent behavior toward other people, and his rape and killing was compulsive, not really thrill-seeking, but tension-relieving instead.
Prosecutor Mike Benito used Long's murder weapon to illustrate how the former X-ray technician cut Michelle Denise Sims' throat, and insisted Long had a violent flame burning inside him, a flame the jury must extinguish.
Bobby Joe Long's violence isn't the same as the impulsive Rusty Workman's. Long is a psychopath.
It may help to think of the psychopath as a predatory individual, and predators don't worry too much about their victims. You know, you've got a cat that's after a mouse. The cat doesn't particularly care about what the mouse is feeling, what the mouse actually goes through, what's happening to the mouse's family and its offspring, and so on.
Compulsive killers enjoy the planning of their actions, and they may plan them in great detail and very considerably ahead of time. For them, the planning leading up to the act is actually part of what they enjoy.
Bobby Joe Long is a serial killer. He admits killing during a rampage of kidnapping, rape, and murder.
Moralists see the psychopathic murderer as the embodiment of evil. Traditional psychologists as the product of a dysfunctional or abusing family.
In court this afternoon, Long's mother broke down on the witness stand. She admitted she never once told her son she loved him, slept with him until he was 10 or 12 years old, and often left him with relatives and friends while she worked as a waitress and barmaid.
Science can now offer another biological element to the causes of this complex disorder. Unlike the impulsive killers, psychopaths like Bobby Joe Long have no damage to the frontal cortex.
You can see, in contrast to the single impulsive murderer, this individual has activation of the prefrontal cortex. So in other words, their prefrontal cortex, which is involved in planning and regulating behavior, appears to be functioning quite normally in this individual. That is consistent with our knowledge that this individual carefully planned and executed his murders. He wasn't an impulsive individual who was just an opportunist. He carefully regulated and controlled his behavior.
The psychopath is clearly mentally capable of planning his attacks. But what is it in the brain that gives him the motive for murder? At the center of the limbic system is the amygdala, which is responsible for our aggressive instincts. When Bobby Joe Long's scan is compared with normal brains, there's a striking difference.
Here is a three-dimensional image of Bobby Joe Long's brain. What we have here is a clear defect right in the general area of the amygdala, where the cortical rim is not closing. It has been reported in a number of individual case studies that persons with lesions in this area often exhibit bizarre, sometimes hypersexual, often aggressive behavior. And it's certainly fair to say that this is not normal in an area that is implicated in emotional self-control. It is possible that this defect was caused by a head injury, which he sustained when he was around 19 years old in a motorcycle accident.
That accident might then lie at the root of Long's extreme aggression. But what brain defect could account for his lack of conscience? Rusty Workman can feel remorse for what he'd done.
I'm sorry for what I did.
Bobby Joe Long couldn't care less.
Most clinical descriptions of a psychopath refer to shallow emotions or things that have affective connotations such as lack of guilt, anxiety, and remorse. And we're beginning to believe that there must be a neurobiological basis for this. And what this basis is, we're not quite sure, but it appears that the parts of the brain that would ordinarily impart affect or emotionality to experience, thought, attitudes, and so on, and behavior, are not working properly in the psychopath. The most interesting lines of research, I think, in the last couple of years revolves around what's been referred to as the lexical decision task.
Is it too tight?
That's fine.
We've attached electrodes to the scalp of our subject, John, and we're recording spontaneous EEG, which is really the sum total of all the electrocortical activity taking place underneath the scalp.
It's a blunt needle. Sorry about that. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just to place your chin right there, nice and comfortable. And
John, if you just blink a few times, you can see that produces dramatic changes in the spontaneous EEG. For that reason, we want to make sure that he is secured. He's looking straight at the computer screen and not moving his eyes too much. So just look straight ahead, and we'll perform the task. I flash on some letter strings for a fraction of a second. You can barely see them. Sometimes a letter string forms a word, sometimes it doesn't. Your task is simply to push a button as soon as you see a word. Is that letter string in the lexicon? Lexical decision test is in the dictionary. And the result is a event-related potential that tells us something about what he is doing while he is processing the information. For the normal individuals, once they had actually decided whether or not what they'd seen was a word, there was subsequent processing that occurred. That is, the word was chewed over in one's head, it was turned around, some sort of mental work went on, association with past experience, all sorts of things would be going on. And this would be reflected in a prolongation of these brain potentials. And this prolongation was greater for the emotional than for the neutral words. The psychopaths, on the other hand, said, well, yes, it's a word, and the brain potentials went right back up to baseline. The implication in this particular research was that the psychopath really processed the information in a very superficial manner. He decided, yes, this is the word, but beyond that, he didn't do anything with it. So all of the rich associations that language have for most individuals seem to be lost to the psychopath.
Bobby Joe Long showed no emotion as the judge read the jury's recommendation.
A majority of the jury, by a vote of 12 to nothing, advised and recommend to the court that it impose the death penalty upon Robert Joe Long.
We can now scan the brains of psychopaths while they do their tests on emotionally laden language. Unlike the normal brain, there's no communication between the rational areas in the front and the emotional ones at the rear. Does this explain the psychopath's lack of remorse? He can separate his terrible actions from his feelings. For psychopaths like Bobby Joe Long, there's no known cure. If he's born without a sense of guilt, does he have no free will? Is he responsible then for his actions? Other challenging questions are raised by some researchers who claim that psychopathy might have a genetic component.
The basis for the disorder is set probably at the time of conception. There are genetic factors involved in the disorder. There are certain propensities that are present in somebody who ends up as a psychopath. This doesn't mean that you're born to be a psychopath, or any more than we say that you're born to be a criminal. For example, some people find it very easy to become socially or emotionally connected to other individuals. And for these individuals, learning the rules of a society, what is right and what is wrong, and internalizing that right and wrong is very, very easy. On the other hand, there are individuals, I think, who find it extremely difficult to become socially or emotionally connected to the people around them.
An American lawyer recently ran a genetic defense in mitigation against the death penalty in a murder trial. There was outrage.
Stephen Anthony Mobley was convicted of killing John Collins during a robbery at this North Georgia pizza carryout. Trial lawyer Dan Summer took the case one step beyond what has been called the abuse excuse. He based his appeal on Mobley's family tree, which he traced over 4 generations. Those 4 generations included a murder, armed robbery, and rape.
I've prosecuted and defended probably a handful of individuals that I would consider psychopathic. However, I've never had anybody like Tony who demonstrates on one hand high intelligence and a high degree of likability with a very heinous crime, one that was done in cold blood, and one in which there's absolutely no defense to the crime itself. By the way, here's the dominoes. Tony held up the manager, John Collins, took some money, apparently wasn't satisfied with the amount of money he was able to get and marched the manager to the office where he was able to get some more money, ordered John Collins to face the wall and pulled the trigger. The bullet struck John Collins in the back of the head, killing him instantly.
Tony Moberly didn't need his victim's money. He came from a well-off family. His father worked his way up from a door-to-door salesman to owning one of the largest chains of stores in the southern United States. What made a child of privilege become a killer?
Usually a child's value system emulates the parent's value system. And Tony's family appeared to be honest and hardworking, so that they had a value system, but Tony did not pick that value system up. His was different. His was lying, cheating, using people, abusing people. He had no regard for the feelings of another person.
When we found out about the family history, it only solidified our belief that there was something going on in the family that suggested a neurobiological or neurogenetic basis for some of Tony's behavioral problems.
Dan Summer based Tony Moberly's defense on the work of a geneticist, Dr. Han Brunner. Brunner has investigated one Dutch family with a history of violent males stretching back for generations, and he's found a mutation in all the men affected.
Comparing the different family members, we found that the yellow symbol was only present in affected males. So each of these yellow symbols represents one of the affected males. I do believe that this metabolic disturbance is affecting the behavior, or at least is setting the stage for possibly abnormal behavior.
We've never argued that the genes or the genetic defect, if it exists, caused Tony to kill. What we were suggesting was that a genetic defect may have had a role in his aberrant conduct and may have in fact diminished his ability to exercise free will. And to that extent, we felt a jury might consider that mitigating in nature, much like years ago, individuals who were diagnosed with certain psychiatric disorders, for example, schizophrenia, were locked up in mental institutions, and then it was determined that these people were suffering from a biochemical imbalance that could easily be corrected if Tony was suffering from a neurobiological or neurogenetic disorder, and that disorder can be either treated or perhaps cured one day, then that might alone be enough reason for one juror to vote for life rather than death. His life literally hangs in the balance on this research.
The jury did not accept the plea for clemency. Tony Moberly is on death row. The argument that the brain defects that can cause crime may be inherited has not yet been established. But scientists think the day will come when they can discover the genetic link in the making of a psychopath.